Okay everybody, I wanted to do a quick tutorial here about how to use UI elements that work within VR. So what I've got here is a scene. This is familiar to people who have done the Christmas game with me around the Christmas period of time. So I've got a scene here, which is the Christmas scene itself. I have the building, which is where most of the game takes place. So this would be the equivalent of the main level. I've also got a main menu. Notice as well that in my asset space I have a scenes folder which contains all of them. Many of you may already have these scenes set up. Many of you may just be setting out to create your main menus. But notice what I've got here is the name of my scene, which I'm currently in, which you can always see top left hand corner in the top bar. The name of the project, in this case Hellzone Christmas, dash the name of the currently open scene, which can sometimes be very useful if you don't know which scene you've currently got open. Notice as well my main scene is called Christmas scene. If you're still using my provided template or you've started with your own one, your main scene may still be called sample scene, which is the default scene name that comes within your project. Probably a good idea to right click and rename that, especially if you're going to be transitioning between scenes by following this main menu tutorial now. So I've got my main scene, which I've got called Christmas scene. I've also got my menu and another one as well. So let's just go into the main menu, which looks a little bit like this. It looks a bit wonky at the minute because I wanted my main menu to be set on an interesting mountain. What you'll see over here is the main menu for my game. You'll notice on the left hand side I've got an XR Origin set up, and you'll notice I've also got some other elements as well, which is what I need for VR to work with main menus. It's actually really simple. If I press play, you can see that this is set up and playing with some music. I'll also be able to test that this works even though I've not got a VR headset plugged in, because it should still respond to left button click. This allows you to test your UI even if you're setting it up for VR. So let me do that now. There we go, and that's taken me to my game. And that horrible sound you're hearing should be the sound of the evil spider that's coming to defeat you. There's the evil spider. So, to create your main menu, so I'm just going to go back and go to where the camera is. If I were to be creating this from scratch, I would want to firstly make sure that I've created a scene to be my main menu. And if you remember, a new scene that's your main menu will come with a camera that you immediately want to delete, because you don't want the default camera, because the default camera doesn't work with VR. So you would go to Game Object, XR, and you would create an XR Origin that is action based. You would position that wherever you wanted. Now again, this won't work by default. If you were to play this now, you'll find that the left and right hands wouldn't work and they wouldn't move dependent where you are, because an XR Origin also requires an input action manager. The input action manager component requires an action asset, and there should be the one from the list, which is the XRI default input actions. If you're using my tutorial or my standard template, there should be two to pick from, and you want to make sure that you're using that one there, XRI default input actions. If you can't see its full name, left click on it and you'll be able to see the full name over there to make sure you're choosing the right one, in case your project has many. XRI default input actions. That will then allow you to detect the movement for the controllers. Remember as well that the Ray controllers or the Ray interactors are what you get by default, which is what you want when interacting with main menus. The rays that come out of the hand represents the mouse cursor click effectively. When you are creating a canvas to represent your main menu, you do that through Game Object, and I'm going through XR here to create a canvas rather than UI, which is where I would normally go, because we want to create a physical canvas, something that's in physical world space that the player can stand in front of, point their hand at, and interact with. So I'm going to create a UI canvas here using the XR tab. This creates all of the inputs and all of the event managers that we need in order to make this work. Do notice though that the canvas by default is 100 by 100. Remember, that is in meters. So if I have a look around, you can see this enormous canvas space, which is not really what I want. I would like a much smaller canvas. So I'm going to choose a canvas of about 2 by 2. Remember, that's still in meters, so 2 by 2 is roughly my height by roughly my height for the width. And I'm just going to change the X and Y and Z position to be 0, 0, 0. And I'm going to press F to focus on that, just so I can see this canvas. And you can position this canvas obviously wherever you like within your scene, probably directly in front of wherever your XR origin is going to be placed. I always recommend that if you are going to create a canvas, remember a canvas is invisible, that the first thing you do is you right click on your canvas and create a child of that, a UI element. Now notice that once we've created our canvas, everything from there is UI as we would normally create UI. So I'm going to create a panel. A panel by default is trying to create something that this rectangular shape, but I don't really want that rectangular shape because it's stretched and distorted. So I'm going to choose none from the source image option. Then what it's doing is taking a colour and making that completely fill the canvas space, which is quite good. Maybe I want it to be semi-transparent, maybe I don't, and I can change that using the alpha channel down here. Maybe I want it to be completely solid and black. If I wanted to create a child of the canvas as well, that's again going to be a button, let's say, you'll notice that the button will be very, very large. So I'm going to use the scale tool to scale that down to something much more manageable. Remember, you want it to be inside of your canvas. You also want to make sure that you are avoiding doing things like this, dragging your button and moving it forwards and backwards. You always want it to be flush with the canvas or any panels that you've got. You may find that when you create UI elements here, they disappear. So if I were to change the order of this around, you will see that particular problem. My button, despite being white on a black background, has disappeared. To guarantee that this is always going to be visible, if you are using something like a panel, make sure that the button is a child of the panel, and that will make it pop to the front. One thing I'm going to mention while we're here is that if you've got a piece of text using TextMesh Pro, so I'm going to create a piece of text using TextMesh Pro here, which again will be very, very large, and I'm going to scale that down to something much more manageable. If you do find it flips upside down, you just need to go and rescale it. If you want to change the font of a piece of TextMesh Pro, you can do that here under the font asset by clicking the little circle. You'll find that there's a very, very limited option here. By default, you only get these Liberation ones, which are the default ones included inside of Unity. If you want to make your own, you can very easily do that through Window and TextMesh Pro, Font Asset Generator, and you can choose any asset, any font that you've got either downloaded from the internet, from any font website, or you can choose your font folder inside Windows on your C drive. You should have access to this on the student machines. Then it's a case of just dragging and dropping the font that you want into your project. Let's go with this Old English text actually. What I can then do is in the Font Asset Creator, drag that font into the source one, so I quite wanted that Old English one, didn't I? Generate the font atlas, save that, save it, and then you should be able to choose that new type of font which I've chosen. So there we go. Remember that you want your name and the game name on your main menus. Worth pointing out, well, let me just double check how much time I've got. Got plenty of time. So worth remembering that you want it to be in keeping with the art style of your game, which also means that the panel, you don't just have to settle for the default source images or no source image. You can instead choose images of your choice if you wanted to as well. So any images that are in here, you do need to choose your image though. I don't think I've got an example preset up here, but any images you do have, you'll need to select it and change its property over here to say Sprite 2D and UI before it will let you choose it from the drop down list. What I'm also going to do is what you may find is you don't just want a single panel in front of your character, maybe you want many. It's entirely possible that in your game, if you wanted something like Beat Saber perhaps, maybe you wanted a panel on the left hand side and a panel on the middle and the right hand side. You can rotate these freely because remember they are just physical objects in world space, but remember to rotate the entire canvas, not just the panel or the buttons that are their children. I'm going to grab this canvas here and move that back because I think that looks quite nice. Remember that when the player loads the game, If you are using a default XR origin that is action-based, the player won't be able to move, but they will be able to look around. So if there's anything that's behind the player you don't want them to see, you need to make sure that you've considered your environment. You need to make sure that there's something there, whether that's an interesting skybox or whether that's a floor or whether that's the inside of an environment, but that's what you want. All I'm going to very quickly do, just make sure I've got time. All I very quickly want to do here is just make sure that you guys are comfortable with how to make buttons transition between scenes. So under File and Build Settings, you'll notice that I've got my main menu, which is the one that's currently loaded here, and I've got my Christmas scene in my build settings. If you don't have those, you can go to your scenes folder and you can drag and drop them in. And if you find that they're in an unusual order, you can change that order around, because you probably want your main menu to load before your game or your win or lose screens. So I'm going to have no button here. I'm not going to have a button over here either. Let's just delete the entire button. That seems more reasonable. And I'm going to use this button to load my game. If you want a script that will transition between scenes, you need to create a script. So I've got one here already pre-set up that's called Change Scene. You only need one script for change your scene, even if you've got many scenes, maybe a win screen and a lose screen, maybe a death screen, maybe your main menu, but it will look something like this, which I detail more in the tutorial on Moodle, where I talk about Unity events. You'll notice that what we're using here on line 4 is Unity Engine.Scene Management. My script is called Change Scene, which, remember, that's the name of the class and that is the name of the script. They must match exactly, including spelling. And I have a function here which is called Load Main Game. Inside of Load Main Game, I instruct the scene manager to load a scene called Christmas Scene, which is why it's so important that you have consistent naming and you don't try and rename your scenes after the fact. What you can then do is attach that script to the canvas object, or any object within your scene, but I find attaching it to the canvas the easiest thing to do. You'll now see that it's sitting there at the bottom of the canvas. I'm going to click on the button, and I'm going to tell the button on click, I want you to look up on the canvas the script that is called Change Scene, and I then want you to call the function called Load Main Game, in which case it will go and do whatever Load Main Game tells it to do. Hopefully you found that useful. Thank you very much. Good luck with your betas and your expo.